This webinar was originally called the Emerging from Quarantine webinar. So you'll see that theme sort of play throughout the content that I'll be providing today. So I want to welcome you to this webinar. Having been locked down for several weeks and finally breaking out of lockdown really felt like emerging from a deep, dark cave for many of us. When we finally ventured out for the first time, a lot of us kind of had this look going on, and we're ready to ditch it and evolve out of the caveman era. You guys are here because health and fitness are values to you, and you're ready to ditch this look that many of us found ourselves in and move forward with some improvements. I'm Ashley Dimaj, and I'll be your host today. This picture is perfect for what some of my behavior looked like during quarantine, a big old wine stain. I'm a behavior modification expert, a therapist, and a nutritionist, but more importantly, I come to you as someone who has overcome my own struggles with health and provided care to hundreds of individuals and families that have wanted some behavior change to affect similar modifications in themselves. So it's with that background that I bring you the science of what works from an empirical perspective and a real world way of weaving that into your life. So all of us on the call today are varied in our history, our baseline, and the areas of health and lifestyle adherence that we personally struggle with ourselves. So this could look like varying degrees of anxiety or depression that we're prone to, how we were raised, and what our definition of health is from a cultural and family perspective, even the medical conditions that we must be considerate of, diabetes, heart disease, and what our current living situation is with roommates, with family, and the level of fitness that we were at kind of coming into quarantine. Most importantly, and what I sort of focus on in my practice, is what we use to cope when life throws curveballs to us. This could look like alcohol, pills, food, TV, you name it, I've seen it. So I want to start here. This is a chart displaying what our health might have looked like for the last 6 or 7 months. So as you can see, the time is going to be on the x-axis here, and our health is going to be on the y-axis. So in this chart, you'll see that back in September, this individual marked themselves an 8 out of 10 in terms of how they would self-report their healthy behaviors. Around November, when Thanksgiving hit, this individual identified them at about a 6 out of 10. You know, the holidays and Thanksgiving sometimes increase maladaptive eating behaviors for ourselves. Let's say this person hit themselves at about a 9 after the new year hit. The New Year's resolutions were going great, and then guess what? February came and quarantine started. So many of us took a real hit to our mental health and physical health during this time. You can see here this individual self-identified at about a 5 out of 10 for health-related behaviors at quarantine, and it steadily goes up. So what's important about charts like this is that it is no doubt throughout our lives and in different seasons of our lives, our health hits peaks and valleys, both of which are fleeting. The really good phases we hit in our health, they don't last. And the really bad phases, they don't last either. Peaks and valleys are the results of micro and macro variables, epigenetics, age, behavior, lifestyle. What matters most beyond the peaks and valleys that are really fleeting is that trend line that runs through the middle of them. The trend line is the mean average of your peaks and valleys over time. This is what's going to cause long-term success or failure in the health-related areas that you want to focus on. This is what causes chronic illness or the absence of it. It's not just a weekend juice cleanse, it's that steady trend line over time that you can apply to consistently. So we impact that trend line by executing small incremental progress steps over time, the things that we can commit to in order to affect sustainable change and getting those valleys less deep and getting those peaks even higher for ourselves. There are a lot of variables that constitute a healthy lifestyle and will yield the outcomes that you want. And the work is in finding the ones that you can commit to. So let's review. A peak is that point of great health in your life. A valley are those seasons in life where you are engaging in poor health and poor lifestyle behaviors. Your trend line is that average of the peaks and valleys over time. And you improve your trend line by getting your peaks higher and your valleys higher over time. But you guys aren't here to talk about trend line. That is a really long term sort of concept that we work on throughout the course of our lives. You're here because you're in a valley right now. COVID and frankly, the gravity of the world has caused many of us to take a dip into a valley. And we need a really strong peak to build that momentum towards lasting change and towards an improved trend line. And maybe just to respect ourselves again, living in alignment with our values. We may even need to learn how to adjust to this as a lifestyle and not just as a quarantine issue. I worked with a lot of clients over the last several months that have said, I'll just get back to the gym when they open again. Well, I'm out of my routine because I'm not headed into the office anymore. We need to accept that even if we don't want it to be, these might be some lifestyle adjustments that we need to deal with in perpetuity. So today we're going to talk about peak boosters, how to get back to a peak. I'm going to hit on 3 components that I think are going to be effective for driving a peak for you guys. The first is a behavior modification concept that is the cornerstone of some of the behavioral psychology premises. 10 peak tweaks that are empirically validated, science-backed tweaks that you can do to drive yourself towards a peak. And then finally, talk about the importance of peak rituals. So let's start with Behavior Mod 101. This is the 3-term contingency. It is the cornerstone upon which behavioral psychology is founded. They call it the 3-term contingency because there are 3 things that we want to be considerate of: an antecedent stimulus, a behavior, and a consequence. So you guys might have heard of cause and effect or stimulus and response. This is really what this is speaking to. A stimulus causes a behavior, which then causes a consequence. Any behavior that we enact is a direct result of a stimulus that is present and also a desired consequence that we would like to have. So a lot of the work that I do is in let me start here. So in behavioral psychology, we say that there are only 4 consequences that humans desire. Any behavior that we do is in order to get attention, escape a demand, get access to a tangible object, or get sensory input. So a lot of the work that I do with folks is related to sensory input consequences and escape from demand consequences. So let me go into this in further detail on subsequent slides. But first, I'm going to throw in a little curveball for you guys. So we talked about the 3-term contingency. I hope that it is simple to understand. What people don't give enough attention to, however, is something that precedes the 3-term contingency. A 3-term contingency is only going to happen when we have a motivating operation. So a motivating operation precedes the stimulus, and it has a direct impact on the rest of the behavior chain by either increasing or decreasing the value of a stimulus. So the motivating operation increases or decreases the value of a stimulus that's present in our environment, and the consequence that we're looking to seek is why we do the behavior in the first place. Let me give you guys some examples to drive this point home. In the first example here, we have extreme hunger. When you have extreme hunger, that is going to increase the value of the stimulus that is present. So we have extreme hunger, which is going to influence the value of the pizza in the kitchen. The pizza in the kitchen is now a more valuable stimulus. We're going to eat the pizza because we're very hungry, and the desired consequence here is that our hunger is extinguished. That is going to be a sensory input consequence. Let's talk about another example. When we have a bad review at work, we might get some anxiety. We see a friend's pack of cigarettes on the table, we smoke that cigarette, the nicotine calms us down. Maybe we have a report due at work, and we see the kitchen from our home office, and we go snack on almonds. The consequence here is we're escaping the report. Finally, if you see your kids fighting, it might make you anxious and pissed off. You see wine on the menu at the restaurant. The wine is more valuable now that you're anxious. You're going to order and drink the wine, and then the alcohol will calm you down. So this really speaks to the behavior chain that is present in any behavior that's observable. We can create a four-term contingency, a motivating operation, an antecedent stimulus, a behavior, and a consequence for any human behavior that we engage in. And from a clinical perspective, here's how we tackle that. We deal with a motivating operation by messing around with satiety manipulation. We affect an antecedent stimulus by being really aware of environment manipulation, how we can introduce or remove things from our environment that will help us achieve desired behavior. Finally, from a behavioral perspective, we want to come up with functionally equivalent behaviors that are going to still get us the consequence that's desired, but not with the maladaptive behavior that we're trying to avoid. So the example here is that we would, in the example of the pizza, how we would manipulate the motivating operation is we want to avoid extreme hunger, right? If we are not hungry, that is going to decrease the value of the pizza stimulus in the kitchen. So with a satiety manipulation intervention, we would have the client eat salad and drink water before the family's pizza arrives. Maybe make a big plate of veggies to accompany the pizza. From an environmental manipulation standpoint, we would have the client not be present and faced with the antecedent stimulus if they were trying to avoid it. Maybe they would just order a small pizza, so when it came, the family had less to share. Maybe you would need to get new roommates. From a functional equivalence standpoint, I usually ask clients to write down what some functionally equivalent behaviors are that they could do that would still get the desired consequence of extinguishing hunger, but would not be with the maladaptive behavior. So maybe depending on what the desired consequence is, you might eat something else, you might go exercise, you might go watch Netflix in the other room. There is something that I didn't talk about in the work here, and this is the most important thing. It is extending the pause. Between any antecedent stimulus and behavior, there is a moment that we, with enough awareness, recognize what we're doing. And the goal here is to extend the pause between the stimulus that is present in our environment and the behavior that we actually engage in. Here's how you do it. You first need to create awareness. I ask my clients to say out loud, this is me about to go off plan by getting too hungry and making a bad decision when I eat. Number two, you comfort the tantrum. You can say, hey, I know that ultimately I can have that cigarette, but first I'm going to work my replacements first. And you have maybe known ahead of time that you're going to go take a walk around the block, you're going to go do some breathing exercises, and you know that the cigarette is still there if you want it afterwards, but you know you're going to work your replacements first. So I touched on that a little bit with number 3. You actually employ the predetermined functional replacement. So in the case of the pizza, that might be to eat a healthy alternative first. And the 4th thing is you reap the benefits. Your choice to employ functionally alternative replacements are either going to cause you to eat less pizza or not eat any at all. Even if this only works 20% of the time at first, it's still 20% less pizza. Okay, let's now talk about the peak tweaks. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you guys research-based interventions that are related to how to level up your health during a time that you're feeling like you're in a slump. The first is the hunger scale. So it's really helpful to identify trouble areas that we have in terms of emotional eating and sort of trying to get more automatic reinforcement or sensory pleasure from our behavior. This scale also creates body awareness to know where you're at and what can impact it. So the goal here is that we eat when we're at a 3. That's very hungry, where our stomach is giving us little grumbles and signals that we have enough acid in our body to break down those foods. Our body needs some glucose. And then we want to be aware of where we're stopping to eat when we're at about a 6. So this is the zone of success. A lot of people that I work with will talk about like times that they eat, like what time should I eat? And my answer is always when you're hungry, like eat when you're at a 3 and stop eating when you're at a 6. Some things to be aware of in this construct are, number 1, the stomach and the brain are connected by something called the vagus nerve, and that takes about 20 minutes to register satiety. So from a gastric theory, we want to make sure that we are finishing our kind of square macro meal, and instead of going to get like a peanut butter toast because it sounds good, we want to give our body a minute to register satiety. The other big game changer here is water. So if you go into a meal with drinking water and you maybe drink some water after you've had what you know to be a square meal, I promise you're going to feel fuller. The last trick here is like popping in some minty gum. Like once your body gives you that signal, oh, I'm starting to get full, you either respect that, or if you ignore it, it's going to shut up and it's not going to tell you that again. So you really need to make sure that like once you hit that signal of your body saying, I'm good, you drink some water, you pop in some minty gum so that other food doesn't sound so great, and then you give your body a minute to register. Number 2, weigh-ins. Weighing in is a really important feedback tool. Frequent self-weighing is linked with successful weight loss and maintenance. Studies prove that twice-a-day weighing is more effective than once a day. Do it right when you wake up and right before you go to bed. My clients report nightly weighing to be a game changer because it causes them to avoid indulging like in a big dinner or snacking and having dessert after dinner because they know they're going to weigh in. Research shows that this intervention is effective for nearly everyone with the exception of normal weight adolescent girls and people with eating disorders. The number doesn't matter as much as the associated behaviors with it. The number is always going to change depending on how much you're weightlifting, how much water you're drinking. If it's in the morning, you're going to typically be about 4 to 5 pounds lighter than the evening. So again, the number doesn't matter as much as the associated behaviors with it. I like this scale. It's available on Amazon for 30 bucks. It's a Bluetooth scale, so it tracks with a free app on your phone over time. Other clients that don't want to make this investment will use a whiteboard marker on their mirror and just kind of track it for themselves. You can also see this number fluctuate during women's menstrual cycle as well. Number 3, drinking water. I don't think I could say this enough. I fill up 2 40-ounce containers of water, and I add this electrolyte powder to it to make it more appealing. Some clients ask, does sparkling water count? Yes, it does. And does green tea help? Yes, it does. In fact, green tea is an empirically validated tool to reduce the body mass index. If you drink 3 cups of green tea in between meals, at least 1 hour after your meal, so that it doesn't interfere with your iron absorption. Water is just critical to maintain satiety and add volume to your stomach. Some clients are successful with putting little reminders on their phone, like, hey, I should be at about 30 ounces by this time of the day. I wouldn't be a good nutritionist if I didn't plug water-rich foods here as well. I want to show you some what I think are really exciting charts. So here you can see how many stomachfuls it takes to fit in 2,000 calories of certain foods. As you can see, fruits and vegetables are so water dense that you would feel like you would be too full to eat anything else if your diet was so full of fruits and vegetables. I think here it's what is that 16 stomachfuls of chopped broccoli that it would take to fill up 2,000 calories. While on the other hand, it's just about 1/5 of your stomach that would be filled if you were to have butter, cookies, M&Ms, cheese, nuts, things of that nature. Another way to say this is looking at food with calories per pound. So, you know, again, vegetables, fruit, starchy vegetables, whole grains, beans are the most water-dense foods that you can eat. They're going to make you feel really full. That's why switching to just a whole food diet really causes people to lose weight, because they're so full they really can't eat anything more. When most of your food comes from fruits and vegetables, you really just can't eat, you cannot overeat. Okay, so let's talk movement. 90 minutes of moderately intense daily activity is the optimum exercise duration for weight loss. Any time of the day is good, but there may be an advantage to exercising at least 6 hours after your last meal. That's what we call fasted exercise. So a lot of folks, if you can fit it into your work schedule, do it before breakfast, maybe before a late lunch or before dinner. So cardio is the most overdone exercise by most fit Americans. I use cardio really judiciously, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. So the important components that I feel are essential when we talk about wanting to hit a stride are weightlifting, interval cardio, and stretching. 60% of your calorie burn per day is from your resting metabolic rate. That is huge. 25% of your calorie burn per day is from non-exercise physical activity, getting up, walking around, doing your normal things. 10% of your calorie burn during the day is from diet-induced thermogenesis. That's the ATP to ADP energy transfer process that turns your food into energy. Only 5 to 15% of your calorie burn during the day is from exercise. So what does this tell us? We really want to focus on your resting metabolism. The biggest impact to your resting metabolism is weightlifting. Muscle is the most metabolic tissue in your body. It burns the most calories. It is the best thing that you can do to do some heavy weightlifting in order to increase your metabolism. From a cardio perspective, I want to share with you guys why I do not advocate steady state cardio. So we have steady state cardio on one hand, which would be like running 5 miles per hour for 5 miles, versus interval cardio, which would be sprinting for 30 seconds, walking for a minute, sprinting for 30 seconds, walking for a minute, or any variation thereof. Our bodies are really smart. They think if we're running for a really extended period of time, we need to shed heavy muscle from our body so that we can be carried by ourselves faster and lighter. So your body is going to go ahead and shed off all the muscle that you've worked really hard to build. That's not what we want. As we just discussed, muscle is your annuity to burn calories without doing anything during the day. So this really drives home the point to show clients the difference between a marathon runner and a sprinter. We have a marathon runner on the left side of your screen here who does steady state cardio, and then you have a sprinter to the right. I will let you decide which body type you would like to have. Finally, I mean, I talked about stretching. Just show me someone past the age of 25 who doesn't have a regular stretching or yoga practice, who's involved in high intensity athletics. I don't know anyone. Okay, let's talk about a whole unprocessed diet, mostly vegetables. So I shared earlier, non-starchy veg and fruits have the highest water content of any food available. So I believe that the base of your pyramid here should be non-starchy plant veggies. You can eat an unlimited amount of non-starchy veggie plant food and it will only serve to make you healthier and more fit. Next up is healthy fats and proteins. So for the programs that I run, I like to see my clients eat mostly non-starchy veggies and then healthy fats and proteins next. Then let's talk about carbs. Fruits and starchy vegetables, in my opinion, are the holiest carbohydrates that you can consume. However, beans, legumes, and grains have immeasurable benefits for our gut flora and a number of other bodily processes. So I do advocate the ingestion of beans, legumes, and grains. Spices and herbs are another one that you can have an unlimited amount of, but they're up here on the pyramid because people don't usually eat so many of them. Finally, recreational treats. A lot of people see me because I don't believe that we should deny ourselves some of the adult pleasures that we indulge in, and who doesn't love a good chocolate cake or cheese plate? So 80-20 rule. I think we should all include recreational treats in our diet, but they should be the exception and not the rule. I want to take a second here to explain the difference between a truly whole sprouted grain and flour. So I work with my clients to deflour their diet. Even a package of bread or tortillas that you get that says whole grain, the grain has been pulverized and powdered into a flour and then processed back, mixed with different things in order to get the bread product itself. Whole grains are better than refined grains when we're trying to lose weight, but intact whole grains like muesli, brown rice, solid beans, rather than those that have been powdered, are beneficial in feeding good gut bacteria, which I mentioned. So instead of buying boxed cereals or oatmeal, just make it out of whole intact oats. I do get most of my carbohydrates from fruits and starchy vegetables, but if I am going to choose a bread product, I like Food is Life, I believe the company is, or Ezekiel, sprouted tortillas, breads, English muffins. Okay, number 6, you've got to slash the booze. This is probably the most common thing I work on in my practice is alcohol regulation, especially during this period of time. So most of the clients that I see really can't achieve their diet and fitness goals when they're consuming more than 6 or 7 drinks per week. For the emerging from quarantine protocol, I'm just going to ask that you simply cut it in half. Whatever you were doing, let's gradually fade out from it. If it was 2 martinis a night, kick it down to 1. If it was 7 days a week, try to kick it down to 3 or 4. Number 7 is strengthen your healthy community. We are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So reach out to a health conscious friend and get reconnected. Get a boost in your circle to have an influence from someone that when you meet up, it's not going to be about overindulging in food or alcohol, and go for a hike. Number 8, timing. It really is everything. We talked a little bit about fasted exercise. Let's also talk about not eating 3 hours before you go to bed. I'm not someone who believes in crazy intermittent fasting protocols, but you do want to limit feeding windows to a maximum of 12 hours per day. So making sure that you're eating within the parameters of like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and your snacking isn't going past that point. The rationale for that is we really want insulin sensitivity. A lot of us are insulin resistant, people with diabetes, for example. So in order to respect our pancreas is really hard work to produce that insulin and get it out there. We want to make sure that we are not overfeeding ourselves. I mentioned the 20-minute rule after a meal. I also want to talk about something called the Premack principle, which in behavioral psychology is basically a first then law. So it is really beneficial to preload your meals with water-dense foods. So when you have a meal in front of you and half the plate is non-starch veggies, you have a couple palmfuls of protein, and then you have kind of mashed potatoes and maybe like a wedge of cheese or something. I don't know, that's maybe a weird meal, but the point is that you want to start eating the non-starchy veg and the protein first, and then move on to the more starchy and fatty foods after you have consumed the holier macronutrients. Also, preloading, so we call that preloading with calorie negative food. The other component is making sure that you eat like your most calorie dense meals in the morning. Eat like a king for breakfast, a prince for lunch, and a pauper for dinner is how the old saying goes. So making sure that our bodies have enough time to digest that. Research shows that you can burn about 70% of a meal if you have a heavy meal for breakfast, but that same meal can only be burned at about 30% if you have it for dinner. Okay, harm reduction and implementation intentions. So instead of vague self-promises to do our best, we want to use specific if-then plans that you really pose for yourself before the critical moment strikes. If I get hungry after dinner, I will eat an apple only, instead of just saying, I'm going to do my best. That is what I call an implementation intention. From a harm reduction perspective, many of my clients lose weight from opting for a low-dose marijuana edible instead of drinking alcohol at night, or maybe choosing sugar-free dark chocolate over a half pound of See's candy. The final aspect I want to talk to you about is tracking on the fridge. So when I fade out a program with a client after they show steady state data trending in the right way, it really moves from me tracking and seeing what they're doing to them tracking and seeing it. So this is the chart that I have on my fridge, and these are the elements that I track for myself. I put a green circle on the days that I have consumed 100 ounces of water. I put a indication of if I've drank alcohol for that day. My target is 3 days a week of drinking alcohol. And then moving back to that hunger scale, I want to make sure that I eat only at a 3 and I stop eating at a 6. So I track that for myself. Finally, some exercise goals are at the bottom. Whatever your program is for cardio, heavy lifting, stretching, tracking is effective for a number of reasons. It's called the Hawthorne effect in behavioral psychology. When you track what you do, it makes you better. It makes your behavior better. Even when I start working with a client and I ask them to send me like 3 days of what they've eaten, they usually clean it up because they know they're going to be reporting it. Okay, so I want to close with peak rituals here. Let's talk about evening. So I use a term that your day starts the night before. I talked about the importance of weighing in, maybe pack lunches. I guess this is more, you know, valid when you're going into the office and you have kids that are in school. Maybe set out your coffee in the morning, fill up your water bottles, check in with yourself and your calendar. Maybe you had a heavy lifting day planned, but your body can't handle it. Maybe you had a like social lunch hour, but you are hitting a critical emergency at work. Laying out your backpacks and briefcases. In the morning, this can change for people on what works for them. The point is you want to wake up about 30 minutes before you actually need to start your day so that you can get your mind right. Weighing in, stretching, meditating or praying, reading, prepping those food and water choices, and checking in with yourself. Okay, so that concludes the presentation that I wanted to share with you guys today. So I want to open it up to any questions that you have.